Thank you kindly for your welcome. I recognise a number of faces here. You make me feel at home. Some of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting. I take it that most of you have read our last issue of Verdict. I hope some of you haven't been sort of brought here by any false pretences, thinking that you are going to attend some usual kind of religious meeting and thereby be comforted, because you might be very discomforted. In our last issue of our Verdict Journal, we called the issue Farewell to Religion. We announced that we were done with religion. However, we're not done with faith, but we are done with religion. And I've returned to add a few more words. It reminds me of a cartoon I once saw in Australia where Wally was writing to one of his neighbours, Mr. Wilson, in the course of the letter, "Dear Mr. Wilson," and what is more, Wilson, he said, "you miserable old cow, you're nothing but a thieving rook and a money-grabbing swindler, Wally." And he put a P.S. P.S. An insulting letter will follow this one. Now, you could say that I'm back with my P.S. We're done with religion, but we're not done with faith. When we say that we are done with religion, we include, and might I say, we especially include the Christian religion. Throughout the course of this seminar, I think we may have some very disturbing reflections to make about the Christian religion. I could summarise it by saying that for the most part, it's a humbug and disaster, and it has been a disaster for 2,000 years. You could take that which is regarded the very holies of holies of the Christian religion, namely its understanding of the death of Christ, and begin with that point, and everything really flows from there. I'd have to say to forget that. Take up what is generally regarded as the most important point of the resurrection. I suppose I'd have to say, well, better discard that. And as it what it means to live the Christian life, and how you live by the Bible, and how you sort of let God come in and take over your life and run it for you, I'd have to say, finish, discard that. Ideas of heaven and hell, the second coming of Christ, I'd have to say, frankly, that I don't believe in the Christian heaven nor the Christian hell. Many other things that perhaps might shock you. I think the truth is more in harmony with Darwinism than its reverse. I say these things so that maybe that if you've been brought here by false pretences, you have a conservative Christian background, just may think, well, that's going to be a little bit rough for me. After all, when I read books, you don't need to be embarrassed about that. If you want to get up and quietly leave, after all, I read books and listen to things on the TV. Thankfully, you can have a switch or on the radio or look at a book, and you have to make a decision. You can't read everything. You can't listen to everything. You make a decision sometimes. Well, I don't think I'm going to profit by that, and you just switch off. So maybe we could have a hymn here, and maybe even you could close your eyes in prayer, and while we're doing something like that, you could sort of, you feel out of place here, you could sneak off. Done with religion, but not done with faith. Religion, we claim, is correlated with evil and guilt, and it's correlated especially with death. And faith, and I wish, and later on I might suggest some things that we could desacralise this word faith, because when it was first used in the time of Jesus, faith wasn't a particularly religious word. In fact, it was more a secular word, and that's one of the reasons why it was chosen. But however, faith is correlated with life. And the fundamental issue here is an issue of life and death, death and life. Religion and faith are not friends, they're antithetical. And the Christian religion and Jesus are not really friends, they're antithetical. The basic issue is life and death, death and life. Not sin, not guilt, not forgiveness, not peace. The fundamental issue is always the issue between life and death. Now, when we begin with the Old Testament, God is not just presented as God, the God of the Hebrews. Again and again, he is presented as the living God. God is essentially the living God. He who created the world calls Israel to life and calls them to live in his sight. He sets before them in the covenant, as recorded in one of the books of Moses, life and death, and implores them to choose life. He has no pleasure in death, only in life. Death is the great evil, the great enemy, because death is the thing which is antithetical to God. It is the extreme opposite to what he is. Thus, when you read the biblical laws, for instance, of cleanness and uncleannesses, or the laws of defilement, there are all sorts of defilements in the Levitical law. There's the defilement of certain diseases, and there's the defilement of childbirth, there's the defilement of certainly bodily issues, there's the defilement of sin. But the most radical defilement, which one scholar calls the father of all defilements or uncleannesses, in all the Levitical laws, is the defilement of death. That is the ultimate. That is the extreme defilement. Now, the Hebrew word for defile is a word that means something which is foreign. It means foreign, strange, unclean. Alien, foreign, strange. That which is strange, that which is foreign, that which is over against the living God is death. And death, with its fear, is the basic human problem. It's not other things. But the fear of death is that which causes all other evil. Now, when we come to the New Testament record, again the key word is life. For instance, the fourth gospel begins, "In him was life, and the life was the light of men." And again, Jesus declares, "I am come that you might have life." In John, which we sometimes call the fourth gospel, life is the key word. Even in that familiar scripture, John 3:16, life is the key word. So it is also in Paul. In the chapters, Romans 5 to Romans chapter 8, the word life is used about 21 times. And so in the New Testament, as in the Old, the issue fundamentally is an issue of life. and death in life, and death in antithesis to life. In the story of Jesus, we have a life that appears on this earth. But it is a life in opposition to religion. We've failed to gain the first thing on this story if we can't see that. It is the story of religion as opposed to life. And if we want to know that religion is anti-life, religion is on the side of death, you just have to look at the central story. Religion is opposed to this life that was manifest, being the light of men. Now, why was religion so opposed and opposed to the death to life? Now, this life, on the other hand, stood over against religion. Now, all religion is involved, and we'll see this further as we go on, and we wrote about it in the last issue of Verdict. Religion is concerned with making distinctions between that which is supposed to be sacred and that which is not sacred. And the whole order of reality is divided into two: the sacred and the secular, the clean and the unclean. Now, it was very apparent that this life was going to desecularize all that and remove all those distinctions, or at least make them irrelevant. You can look at this life in relation to his relationship to his Father, to God. Jesus had a unique consciousness of God, and he claimed a direct access to God, a direct, not a mediated relationship to God. That's what religion does. You use all sorts of sacred things, and the purpose of having sacred things, like a sacred mountain, a sacred day, a sacred place, a sacred temple, a sacred rock, a sacred cow, doesn't matter what the sacred is. The purpose of the sacred is to mediate for you a relationship with God. Jesus had an unmediated and immediate relationship to his Father. That's why he uses the expression Abba Father, that no Jew would ever dare to, because Abba it was a Hebrew word in the familiar, the Aramaic language. Abba meant daddy, papa. A familiar, intimate, family relationship term. And because Jesus claims such a direct relationship to his Father, he made religion irrelevant. You don't need those things to mediate a relationship with God, because he was teaching his disciples that the relationship which he had, they too might have, the Abba relationship with God. Now you look at this life from the point of view of his relationship with others. It's expressed in the brief word of Luke: he went about doing good. Yeah, of course, his opponents also were do-gooders. They aspired to do good. But the way in which Jesus did good was different from the way in which they aspired to do good, because they always aspired to do good within a religious context. But Jesus did good in such a way, his life was manifested in such a way that he made it clear that he was so determined to do good, he was prepared to make all religious distinctions and boundary lines irrelevant. So if religion was to survive, this life had to go. It had to be sacrificed, and so you have this conflict developing. And as the storm clouds gather, you can get the picture. You remember the story. These disciples are with him. They are attracted to this life and to his teaching. And the storm clouds begin to gather as the conflict between religion and life. comes to the crunch point, they began to have second thoughts whether or not they ought to continue on in their present course. And what did Jesus say in this context? Fear not those who kill the body, but they are not able to destroy your life. The word there in the Greek, in the original, means life. They are not able to destroy your life. That was the faith of Jesus. In his dying agonies, as he was being put to death by religious authority, and because of the conflict of religion against this life, he commits his life to the Father. And God raises him from the dead. And here it is demonstrated in the resurrection. The faith of Jesus that a life lived in God as he lived it is essentially indestructible. Now, faith is saying yes to that kind of life. You see, Paul, before his great turnaround, he sought life in his dedication to religion. He never found what was wrong with that until he came in contact with the one who was alive. And when he came into contact with life, he was possessed by the Spirit of life. That's an expression he uses, the Spirit of life. Then he saw what was wrong with his dedication to religion, and if we have to put our finger on it, what is wrong with religion, the word Paul uses is the law. What is the deficiency of law? A life in dedication to religion or the law is that, as in one page he says, it can't give you life. If it can't give you life, it's the way of death. It's that which stands opposed to and that which is opposition to life, namely God himself. It's antithetical to life. It's letter and not spirit. But what we are offered is not a book. We're not offered a religion in the gospel. We're not offered an ism. What we are essentially offered in the gospel is life, and only life can beget life. That's why you can't get it from a book. You can't get it from an ism. You can't get it from a religious system. Only the one, only life that has been victorious in the resurrection can beget life and impart the Spirit of life. And when one says yes to life, what kind of life? Life, the quality of life now is that life is life-affirming. The Spirit of life is life-affirming. It is life-orientated. It is life-healing. It is life-sustaining. It is life-healing. It is life-giving. And evil, on the other hand, is anything which is antithetical to life. It's not just the things that the irreligious people do, like those who discard all good morality and all good ethics, and they openly, flagrantly violate the principles of life. Now, if they could get life from that, it wouldn't be evil. But why that sort of behaviour is evil, because it is the running after, it is the embracing of nothingness. It's nihilism. It's that which is against God, the very opposite of what he desires for his people. If they could get life out of it, it wouldn't be evil. But what religious people do, and this is the scandal of the teaching of Jesus, and of Paul, what religious people do, that won't give them life either, and therefore religious people therefore are not getting life from what they're doing. That also is nothingness. It leads to death. They can't be any better than the scandalous sinners. And so that makes the wall of distinction between the unclean outside and the unclean in the religious city. It makes the wall, it throws down the wall and makes it obsolete. This helps us to understand the nature of true freedom. When you embrace life, that which is the spirit of life, life-affirming, life-sustaining, life-giving, you're on the side of life. God doesn't give you a book of rules. That would be antithetical to life too. He doesn't propose to take control of your life and run it for you. That's not what God is about. You have embraced life, and the very essential of life is to be free. And all your decisions now, on what basis do you make your decisions? Not out of a cold book of rules and following some ism. Your decisions in all the situations of life is made in the context of the light of the gospel as to what you have chosen and what in every decision you constantly affirm. It's very practical. You might have to make a decision in the real context of separation, divorce, remarriage, and you can't, in all the sticky situations of real human existence, you can't run to the church and get the rule. You can't run to the Bible because it's not there either. If you think it's in the Bible, you're only imagining it. It'll lead you into guilt and bondage and all such things that sometimes distort the reality of life, because no book of rules can fit all the varied situations of human existence. But you are free. You have affirmed life, and if you have chosen and are motivated and moved by the Spirit of life, you will make a decision in harmony with that Spirit. And that'll alter your views of heaven and hell too. As if to say a heaven is a place for those who get pie in the sky when they die by and by as the result of following the rules, and hell is a place for the baddies. I mean, there's no reward in this sense of a sort of a thing that rewards those who do good or those who do good because of the reward. That is the prostitution of all morality. The reward of the good deed is the good deed. And the reward of the evil deed is the evil deed. Because if you have embraced life, what is the reward of life, of embracing it? Come on, tell me, what is it? It's life, of course. The reward of life is life. That's why I say the reward of the good deed is the good deed, if you want to put it that way. The reward of life is life. And faith means to live saying yes to life in the full freedom of life, in the full uncertainty of it, to make your decisions. And whatever you do, you can live life out in 1,000 different contexts. You can portray the spirit of life in the context of being an entertainer, if you like. Goodness me, some people we need to laugh, don't we, sometimes? Voltaire once says, God is a clown playing to an audience who is too afraid to laugh. You might do it as a ball player. Someone I read in this country said, God put me here on this earth to play ball. Well, we need to play too. You may do it as a rock star who goes out there and feeds the millions out there in Africa. Or as a Mother Teresa. But you may do it in a very obscure, unnoticed way. But the spirit of life that's where it's all at. Now, to live in that faith means that you live in the faith of what you have chosen is indestructible. Life is indestructible. That is the faith of the resurrection. He that lives and believes in me, Jesus said, shall never die. And that life is available to all without distinction, to all religious distinctions, because we have to say now that when it comes to ultimate destiny, religion is irrelevant. Whether you are a Christian religion, the Hindu religion, the Muslim religion, it's irrelevant when it comes to destiny. It's whether you were moved by, whether you've opened your soul to the Spirit of life. And that's not confined just to the Christian religion, friends. Why, you'll find that all over the earth. It's equally available to a Hindu, it's equally available to a Muslim, it's even available, if you please, it's available equally to a Marxist or an agnostic. And they demonstrate it. Those who are moved and live and have said yes to life, they demonstrate it by a spirit of compassion and justice and goodness and caring for others. They're on the side of life. And the resurrection faith assures us that they too shall never perish.